So, let's transition to the Libyan Civil War report. Last time I did a Libyan Civil War report, this was generally the state of the war. The Government of National Accord, or the GNA, controlled the western part of the country around Tripoli. The GNA is officially recognized by the UN and is militarily supported by Turkey. On the other hand, there's the Libyan National Army, which is commanded by General Khalifa Haftar, and supported by your usual cast of far-right Middle Eastern governments, like Egypt, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia.
Who's in charge here?
The GNA claimed land that was previously taken by Haftar. The GNA now completely controls the city of Tripoli, their stronghold, after being under siege. They pushed the Libya National Army out of their last stronghold in western Libya.
Get the fuck out of my room and play Minecraft!
The GNA advanced on Sirte, a city on the coast in central Libya. In response, the president of Egypt, El-Sisi, offered a ceasefire on behalf of Haftar. The GNA refused because this wasn't the first time a ceasefire was requested when it looked like the LNA and Haftar were starting to lose. And now things are really kind of heating up, and not in a good way. Egypt warned the GNA that if they continued advancing on the city of Sirte, Egypt would respond with military force.
Bomb. Armed.
The GNA said that this is functionally a declaration of war, and as far as they were concerned, they will treat it like a declaration of war from Egypt.
And the dead lay in pools of maroon below.
And then, of course, the usual suspects swooped in to support El-Sisi. Saudi Arabia and the UAE offered diplomatic support to Egypt after El-Sisi said his country had a legitimate right to intervene in Libya. So El-Sisi said that Egypt was entitled to defend itself after receiving, quotes, direct threats from terrorist militias and mercenaries, end quote, supported by foreign countries. El-Sisi ordered the Egyptian army to be ready to carry out any mission, and it looks like he's using the same type of hollow gesture to terrorism that the U.S. does all the time. I mean, we were threatened by these anonymous-ass groups, so we have the right to declare war. Okay, dude, what the hell?
We must stop the terror. I call upon all nations to do everything they can to stop these terrorist killers.
So here's another direct quote from El-Sisi. Here's a couple. These are taken from Arab News, by the way. Quote, if some people think that they can cross the Sirte-Jufra front line, this is a red line for us. Any direct intervention from the Egyptian state has now acquired international legitimacy. Our goals will be to protect our western borders and support the restoration of security and stability in Libya as it is part of Egyptian national security, end quote.
The real question is, can you fight?
Meanwhile, the U.S., for once, doesn't particularly have a dog in this fight.
I'm shocked to find that gambling is going on in here.
Ultimately, the reason countries are picking sides is to get a stake in that sweet, sweet oil money.
Because they have lots of oil, and we'll take that.
But I think the U.S. probably assumes, rightfully, that the U.S. will be getting some of that sweet oil money no matter what. In fact, it seems like the U.S. is quite squeamish to the idea of the Civil War getting bigger. After Egypt functionally declared war on the GNA, the U.S. required that there would be a ceasefire in Libya, and that request will surely not be fruitful.
That's okay. We're just going to tariff your nation. We're going to tariff you. Either you're going to agree or not.
So this is turning more and more into a Turkey-Egypt proxy battle in Libya. Or not just Egypt, but also the UAE, because Turkey has particularly big issues with the UAE, because Erdogan claims that, and he's probably right about this, honestly, he's probably completely right. If you know anything about how the UAE works, he claims the UAE backed the attempted coup in Turkey in 2016. The UAE is backing Haftar, which is, it's a civil war, but it's functionally an attempted coup that devolved into a war.
Yeah. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing.
And it very well is turning into a proxy war for, obviously Turkey and Egypt specifically. While Turkey has issues with the UAE, they have just as many or more issues with Egypt. The reason being, Erdogan's party, the ruling party, the AKP, publicly supported the Muslim Brotherhood after the Egyptian president Mohamed Morsi was overthrown. And eventually Erdogan said that Turkey would stand by whoever was elected as the result of legitimate elections. And the Turkey has kind of distanced itself from the Muslim Brotherhood. There's still that animosity because the Muslim Brotherhood is more closely aligned ideologically with the AKP in Turkey. And they were overthrown by people backed by Saudi Arabia and the UAE. So there still is that ideological tension whether or not Turkey is still affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood in any way. I hope that's clear. I feel like I've rambled a little bit what I was getting at. All I'm really saying is Turkey, Egypt, the UAE, and more all have incentives to fight in this proxy conflict of the Libyan Civil War, and it could get really ugly. It already is pretty ugly, but we shall see.